Namaste Vidya, Monisha Khushro. A very good morning to you all. Myself, JVN Dr. Ravi Jain, Assistant Professor, Department of Practice of Medicine, Faculty of Homeopathic Science, and Jyoti Vidyapeeth Women's University. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss about irritable bowel syndrome. In the next lecture, we have discussed about inflammatory bowel disease that consisted of ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss about irritable bowel syndrome. What is irritable bowel syndrome? It is a functional bowel disorder in which the abdominal pain is associated with defecation or change in bowel habits. So there is abdominal pain. There are two things in inflammatory irritable bowel syndrome. We have two things. Number one is abdominal pain, and the number two is change in the defecation or change in the bowel habits. So it is characterized by altered bowel habits. In the altered bowel habits, we have abdominal pain and absence of detectable organ pathology. So altered bowel habits with abdominal pain and absence of any other detectable pathology gives rise to the suspicion of irritable bowel syndrome. It is most common cause of gastrointestinal reflux and is frequently abstainism from work. Because of this disorder, the most commonly people are coming to the physician, and also due to this, the patient remains absent from his work. The most common age incidence is before the age of 30 years, and female to male ratio is 3:1. That is, females are more prone for developing irritable bowel syndrome. There can be a history of physical or sexual abuse in childhood that can lead to the development of irritable bowel syndrome. What is the pathophysiology that is important in the cases of IBS? We have psychosocial factors like anxiety. There can be depression, somatization, neurosis, and panic attacks. All these things we will be discussing in the next year in psychiatry. So there can be various psychosocial factors like anxiety, depression, somatization, and neurosis. There can be panic attacks. There can be altered gastrointestinal motility, which can be presented by diarrhea that exhibits rapid jejunal contraction waves, rapid intestinal transit, and an increased number of fast and propagated colonic contractions. So there can be diarrhea or there can be constipation. This is the altered gastrointestinal motility. So due to altered gastrointestinal motility, the food can go faster and can lead to diarrhea, or it can lead to constipation with a decreased orofecal transit and reduced number of high amplitude propagation colonic contraction waves. There can be abnormal visceral perceptions like intestinal distension induced by inflation of balloons in the ileum. There can be colon and rectum, a consequence of altered central nervous system processing of the visceral sensation. So the sensation can be altered, and this can lead to balloon-like inflation in the ileum, colon, and rectum, due to which the food gets stuck there and is not propagated properly. There can be infection and allergy following an episode of acute gastroenteritis, the indolent or specific dietary components, particularly lactose or wheat. There can be abnormalities of the gut microflora. Histologically undetectable mucosal inflammation can be seen. These triggers abnormal secretomotor functions. Now the clinical features of IBS. It can manifest as recurrent abdominal pain. So there can be recurrent abdominal pain. The pains are of chronic or cramping nature that is felt in the lower abdomen and is relieved by defecation. So there is recurrent abdominal pain that is of chronic or cramping nature. It is usually felt in the lower abdomen and is relieved by defecation. There is abdominal bloating that is worsens throughout the day. There can be alternate episodes of diarrhea and constipation. So, altered bowel habits with alternate diarrhea and constipation. There is passage of mucus is most common, and the rectal bleeding does not occur. So there is passage of mucus, but rectal bleeding does not occur. And the sense of incomplete evacuation is always there. The patient wants to go to the stool again and again. The patient do not lose weight and are constitutionally well. Despite of all these symptoms of pain, abdomen, of altered bowel habits, and of all the other things, the patient does not lose his weight. He is constitutionally well. Now, the associated symptoms. There are various symptoms that are associated with IBS that includes pasty stools. There can be ribbony or pencil-like thin stools. We have studied ribbon-like stool in Arnica montana. These stools are present in irritable bowel syndrome. There can be the symptoms of heartburn. There can be bloating of abdomen, back pain, weakness. There can be faintness, palpitation, or urinary frequency. I will again repeat the associated symptoms. It can present with pasty stools, ribbony, or pencil-like thin stools. It can present with heartburn. There can be bloating of abdomen, back pain, weakness. There can be faintness, palpitations, and urinary frequency. Now, how to diagnose such a case? The diagnosis of IBS is usually clinical in nature. There can be recurrent abdominal pain or discomfort at least 3 days in a month for last 3 months. That is associated with 2 or more of the following features. I will again repeat it. There will be recurrent abdominal pain or discomfort at least 3 days per month for last 3 months, and with 2 or more of these features. Improvement with defecation. So the pain is better after defecation. The onset is associated with change in frequency of the stool. So the onset is usually associated with change in frequency of the stool, and the onset is associated with change in form or appearance of the stool. So appearance or form is changed and the stool is changed. The full blood count is usually done. The fecal calcoprotein, the sigmoidoscopy are usually done routinely and normal in IBS. So all the investigations are usually normal. Colonoscopy in elder patient is done to exclude the chances of colorectal carcinoma. Now, how to manage such case of IBS? So reassurance and support is essential because they have the fear of cancer. The patient has the biggest fear of getting cancer. So we have to give the support and reassurance. Symptomatic treatment consists of antidiarrheal drugs like loperamide. For the constipation, we have to give silane husk or methyl cellulose. These are basically fibrous substances which gives strength to the intestine and increases the motility. And for abdominal pain, we give smooth muscle relaxant, tricyclic, antidepressants. Now, in the next part of this session, we'll start with diverticular diseases. The IBS is complete. Now we start with diverticular diseases. So what are diverticular diseases? This is a small topic. That's why I included this topic with irritable bowel syndrome. So there is herniation or sac-like protrusions of the mucosa through the muscularis at the point of nutrient artery penetration. So at the site when the nutrient artery is penetrating the mucosa, there is herniation or sac-like protrusion that is called as diverticula. There are 2 types of diverticula that occurs in the intestine. It can be true diverticula or false diverticula. So false is also known as pseudo diverticula. A true diverticulum is a sac-like herniation of the entire bowel wall. So what is the difference between true and false? In a true diverticulum, there is sac-like projection of the entire bowel wall. And the pseudodiverticulum, it involves only the protrusion of mucosa and submucosa through the muscularis propria of the colon. Diverticulitis is the inflammation of the diverticulum. So as the name suggests, inflammation of the diverticulum is diverticulitis. What are the different causes of diverticulitis? The increase in the intraluminal pressure, low fiber diet. If you are taking low fiber diet, it will cause increased pressure to move ahead the food material. That will cause diverticular formation. Small volume of stool require great intracolonic pressure for the propulsion and leads to herniation of the mucosa. It affects 70% of the population above the age of 80 years, and the mean age is 59 years. And now it's shifting to affect younger population. So diverticular diseases usually affect older age group people because the nerve supply and all the intestinal motility decreases. But nowadays, due to the lifestyle and due to the food habits, it is shifting to the younger population. The prevalence is more common in females than in males, but in general, it is almost same. It commonly affects the left and sigmoid colon, and the rectum is always spared. So the rectum, as in, we have studied in Crohn's disease, is always spared, whereas in ulcerative colitis, the rectum is involved. Now, what is the pathophysiology? Pathophysiology, we have low fiber diet as the sole culprit that is responsible for the development of diverticular diseases. The onset occurs acutely when the diverticula becomes obstructed. So when the diverticula becomes obstructed, there is onset occurs acutely. The pathogenesis is more complex and multifactorial. The diverticula occurs at a point where the nutrient artery vasa recti penetrates the muscularis propria. resulting in the breakup integrity of the colon wall. So the place of where the vasa recti penetrates the muscularis propria, the diverticular formation occurs. High amplitude contraction and constipation, high fat content stool within the sigmoid lumen in the area of weakness in the colonic wall result in creation of diverticula. So all these factors are responsible for the development of diverticula. The vasa recti is compressed or eroded, leading to the perforation of or bleeding. So if the vasa recti gets compressed or eroded, it can lead to perforation or bleeding. There can be chronic low-grade inflammation that plays a key role. Now, what are the clinical features of diverticular formation? In the diverticulitis, there will be fever, anorexia, obstipation, absolute constipation will be there, and there will be leukocytosis. There will be pain in lower quadrant abdominal pain that will be colicky in nature. Colicky pain is usually suprapubic and is felt at the left iliac fossa. And the sigmoid colon is usually palpable, and the attack of diverticulitis is therefore tenderness, guarding, and rigidity will be found. So you will find guarding, tenderness, and rigidity in case of diverticulitis. There will be generalized peritonitis, which will indicate diverticular perforation. If there is generalized peritonitis, it will indicate diverticular perforation and stigmatitis. Pericolonic abscess in the patient has abdominal distension. If the patient has abdominal distension, then we can think of pericolonic abscess. What are the different investigations that can be done in case of diverticular diseases? The diagnosis of diverticulitis is best made on CT scan. Variant anemia confirms the presence of diverticular. So, by giving variant anemia and checking for the X-rays, you will find about the diverticular presence. Flexible sigmoidoscopy to exclude a coexisting neoplasm has to be done. Colonoscopy requires expertise and carried out the risk of perforation. So, colonoscopy can cause perforation, hence it is optional. What is the differential diagnosis? The differential diagnosis includes colorectal carcinomas, ischemic colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, ovarian cyst, endometriosis, acute appendicitis, and pelvic. I will again repeat it: colorectal carcinoma, ischemic colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, ovarian cyst, endometriosis, acute appendicitis, and pelvic disease. The complication includes abscess in 16% of the cases, perforation in 10%, stricture 5%, and fistula 2% of the cases. So most common are the abscesses, and then perforations. Now, what is the treatment for diverticular disease? So asymptomatic disease discovered on imaging studies is managed by diet alteration. So the most important thing is alteration of the diet. The fiber-rich diet and supplementary products like Metamucil, Fibercorn, or Cicluzib are useful. For the symptoms of diverticulitis, nothing per oral, IV fluid, antibiotics, ciprofloxacin, and metronidazole are used. The surgical management consists of emergency surgery for severe hemorrhage and perforation. If hemorrhage or perforation are there, we have to go for emergency surgery. Percutaneous damage, drainage of the acute parabolic abscess is done. Elective surgery after recovery from separate acute attacks of obstruction, resection of the affected segment with primary anastomosis is usually done. So this was all about diverticular diseases, and also this chapter is complete. So the alimentary tract and pancreas chapter is complete. Now we will start with hepatobiliary system in the next lecture. This session was powered by digital version 2.0, Jyoti Vidyapeeth Women's University. I hope you are satisfied with my digital session. If you have any question, kindly mention in the comment box. I will try to respond. So this was all for today. Thank you very much. We will meet in the next lecture with a new topic.